back. It's now and start off with the national like the shillings. HIF of
the room on the bed. Letter to the and been in from best chief I observed that the reasons for prosecutions were
them making about the document not satisfied from the evidence that they are on the act of the investigating officer. There are compelling reasons to deny
monkey after they and accused to court order require them to provide any documents required by investigators for the misappropriation of funds at the NHIF and were illegal but not without specific terms and conditions.
Each person released bond of Kenya shillings 1 million with authority. 2, in the alternative, each person may be released on bail costing a sum of Kenya shillings 100,000 and provide one person who deposit a copy of a national identity report.
And 2, public said health have lost to 2 billion shillings through online payment system Jambo Bay.
I must admit that I find the circumstances presenting in this case at this stage quite challenging to the prosecution. To the release of the persons on bond, it inevitably has to go beyond the charges and go into the beam of the evidence that is meant to be tendered at the trial.
In spelling out bail terms for the accused, Chief Magistrate Francis Andai pointed out that whereas the right to bail is not absolute, in place observed the prosecution had failed to give compelling reasons to why Geoffrey Mwangi, Wilbert Court, be denied bail. Shadrach Miti, KTN News, Nairobi.
Right, so the war on graft. Let me start with you, Honorable Kiwa, on whether Kenya is making reasonable progress in fighting graft. We've had quite a number of arrests, no convictions so far. It could be a feeling that, you know, the DPP is doing a lot, but are you satisfied that we're actually making progress towards fighting graft?
If you are to stop somewhere on your way to Nakuru or any other part of the country, you ask Kenyans, the fight against corruption is real. They would actually tell you these are just semantics. These are just the theater of the absurd. The government ought to be more serious. You see even the body language of most of the accused in court, they seem to be enjoying the limelight as if it is just a parade for those who have made it. Because you see, corruption has become synonymous with acquisition of wealth. And therefore, wealth is the answer to many problems. And the risk is that what is happening is that soon Kenyans will be tired of seeing people being arraigned in court. Because
it has become a normal thing.
It has become a normal exercise. We're not interested in convicting people, but before you charges against somebody, prepare the ground such that we can even have 1 or 2 convictions so that we know that things have been done. Again, these cases dragging in court, we are missing people's names. Remember, these people have relatives, they have also supporters. We are going to momentum such that society will feel everybody is corrupt, and therefore, if you've not been caught, you have no moral ground to say so-and-so is corrupt. So it is a serious problem, and I think the president ought to think of how to resource the judiciary and all arms of government that are dealing with justice system, because you see, judiciary is not properly resourced, both in terms of human resource and also in terms of finance. The office of DPP is not properly resourced. So what is happening is just a charade. I think it is just for show, for the donors to say Kenya is doing something about corruption.
Joy Brenda, do you agree that Kenya is yet to begin that fight seriously?
I think we made strides in the fight against corruption. Because there's once upon a time, a certain cadre of people were actually virtually untouchable. And we have seen people being taken to court and being prosecuted, even though I agree we have not seen convictions yet. The bit I'm a bit apprehensive about is the connect between the evidence and the convictions. Because, you know, sometimes you can arraign somebody in court, but if you don't have enough evidence, they get acquitted. And then because of the principle of double jeopardy, even if you later find out they're culpable, you've already assisted them to evade the dragnet. That's one. Secondly, it's the issue about asset recovery. Because if you have made any gains from cases of corruption, you need to be penalized for it. Corruption, I mean, if I'm going to steal 1 billion shillings, go sit in committee for 4 years and then come out. I mean, it's a good day at the office. That's it's
worth the investment.
It's worth the investment. But people have to feel the sting of corruption in their pocket, and that's something we still have not seen effectively. Another thing that I would like to see is what Honorable Kirwa has alluded to, is a resourcing, because we've gotten to a place where the judiciary has become the weak link in the fight against corruption. See a lot of activity with the DCI, a lot of activity with the DPP, it gets to the judiciary and it's like it just mutes and it sort of dies. But now if we don't revive the judiciary such that it seemed to be also a partner in this fight, you'll see scenes like what happened with the Boda rider. People will start taking matters in their own hands. If we know you're corrupt, we'll pick you up and throw you in a dumpster. We'll shoot you in the streets. We'll be like, you know what, you've eaten enough of our money. People will start getting so frustrated.
That would be a dangerous place to be.
Yes.
Very dangerous place to be. Honorable Mtambo, your thoughts on that and the fact that we also have the DPP actually pronouncing himself regarding the judiciary and saying that the war on graft is actually lost at the judiciary, according to him.
Before I go to DPP, I'll go to Mheshimiwa Kirwa and disagree with him a little bit. When he says you walk in the streets of Nakuru and you stop somewhere and you ask people whether the war on corruption is real, I want to tell you it is real. It is real because we have seen, like how our beautiful lady has alluded to, that we have seen its roar for the first time. And Kirwa has been in government. He will tell you that before, there are some people who are not touchable. Nobody ever thought that you could even arrest a judge or a magistrate for that matter. We have seen judges and even deputy chief magistrate being arraigned in court this time around. So we need to give kudos to those who are doing the work. And if we don't support them either morally or by even echo what they are doing, then number about the judiciary or the DPP or the DCI. The issue is with the individuals. People have turned against the law, and people don't respect institutions. If I sit in an office and I am charged either in court of law or there is a case against me, like what is happening in Parliament. Parliament gets some report from Auditor General, and you are caught that capable of misusing public money. That is an economic crime. You need and you hold, even before DPP comes or before DCI comes to your office, you need to forget that office. We have saw many ministers, a lot of them, and a lot of officers who have gone through Parliament. And you know, Kirwa will tell you, we have a lot of reports from Parliament, okay, which have recommended prosecution of some officers, and these officers are still enjoying the office. Forget about what you are seeing in the office. We have people who have been mentioned in Parliament, report tabled, audited done, and these people are told you are capable of 1, 2, 3, and they still enjoy the flags of our country.
In fact, that's one of the things that the DPP raised in regards to 2 cases. I think one of them was the Deputy Chief Justice, Mwilu, and the second one was Governor Obado, in regards to the fact that the court has released them, which again is now looking at the spirit of the law and the actual law as it is. So as Kenyans, we're not in a space or a culture where people step down because their name is mentioned. But for instance, the governor for Migori, Okoth Obado, he has several things that he's dealing with, yet would still see him, active, so to society. There's no lack of, but
about a report is been you found our fight about done by of you the invoke corruption more for Senate doing corruption in because you are stealing from because even the British, you remember Sir Charles Drake, who was knighted as Sir because he was a pirate in the deep seas. We still go the same mentality. As long as you are not stealing from us, you have not stolen from our neighbor, you are a hero, you are appropriating what does not belong to us, you are bringing it closer to us. And there are enough examples. And even some of the guys in court, names withheld, it is a rumor they are going to run for governor in 2022. And they are likely to win. And 2023 will be here.
Debating
the same thing. Now, so, the challenge is there is the issue of institutional breakdown. Because when Parliament does recommend, Parliament has no capacity to investigate sufficiently and say so-and-so should go to jail. They hand over to the other arms of government, including the DCI and including the DPP, which also must be powered by the executive for purposes of ensuring that is done. And if Parliament does make a recommendation, the President, in his own wisdom, and he has information at his disposal, should be able to tell somebody, you are no longer useful to my government. Please, can you ease yourself out of it so that the rest of us can continue the journey?
But we have seen him do that, and he was under a lot of fire, according to him.
But what he should be doing is he should be doing when he has enough evidence, because if there is any Kenyan who can be given all the information, is the president. No other person. He's the only Kenyan who can know what Kirwa is doing now.
All right. Joy Brenda, let me give you the last word on matters corruption before we move on to something else on the way forward, because it's not a lack of laws, it's not a lack of institutions, but I think we need to soul search ourselves.
It's a value system problem, and the problem with that is that it goes to the individual. It's not even a matter of the society, because who's the society? It's all of us. It's the individual. Shakespeare called them men of low degree. Men here now including women, but men of low degree, meaning you yourself do not value yourself enough to have a standard of honor so that you can say, nobody can walk on God's green earth and say that I have eaten their money. There are many people who are in leadership today who cannot honestly say that They themselves are pointing fingers at others, but the bed they're sleeping on was bought with money of ill-gotten or some ill-gotten gain. So we have to come to a place where what sort of value system are we instilling in our children, and what value system do we have ourselves? Because we're busy talking about these Ambira boys, but these Ambira boys have got parents, they have relatives, they grew up in a certain society. They are a reflection of who we are. We cannot point fingers, one finger at them, because four are pointing back at us. And that's the problem we have with leadership today. The MPs are talking loudly about the issue about the president is not clamping down on corruption. They themselves have just got a report from their Powers and Privileges Committee saying that scandal of being bribed in the toilets should not be taken to the DCI. There's not enough evidence. It's the kettle calling the pot black. It's absolute ridiculousness. Okay. If we don't deal with that software issues, the law becomes a tool of sanitizing illegality and corruption. And so we have to come to a place where people themselves are ashamed of themselves when they are engaged in corruption. And that's why we are not.
Yeah, what is it that is going to bring that shame? And I mean, like I said, we have institutions that have been put in place to deal with that. And the search for the next Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission CEO is on, and we do know that we have the outgoing Halake Wako. But Honorable Mtambo, even in regards to the EACC, what is their role? They're very silent in this fight. Maybe they're doing the investigations, we don't know, but maybe Kenyans would need to hear more of what they are actually doing.
I think if Kenyans have not had enough what yes, it time when money and thing we also people I mean share that not what we expect. No. The meal on the table is that people have been arraigned in court, and we have an institution, and that is where I'm taking the wall back now to societal problem and to individuals. When you are mentioned in such a cases, you have to respect the institution, which is, which has recommended either step down. You don't need to wait for a president to tell you step down. Because I said I can tell you how many ministers we have, and I'm going back to the ministers because it starts at the top. The ministers out there, we have reports from Parliament that you need to be investigated or you need to be taken to court. So those reports are rotting in the Parliament. What do? Those guys are still enjoying. We have seen here people smiling in court, like we're saying. They have been taken into court. Actually, they need to be ashamed of themselves. They don't even think of going back to the office. We have seen governor being taken to court, and tomorrow he's waving. So it is about the societal issue, and the integrity issue is about myself. What is my conscience telling me? I mean, you cannot be accused of murdering somebody, and tomorrow you open an office and you expect somebody to come and say hello to a murderer. I mean, those are the kind of issues we need to look into, but not what the government has already done. What we have done, we have the laws, we have institutions, we have arrested, we have taken people to court, so it is already there. What else do you need to align them and call a firing squad? No, it's about now individuals.
Honorable Kirwa, what would bring that shame? Because we're talking about shame, the shame. When we see some of those prosecuted, literally they come into court with a smile, almost like, it's triumph. And they can almost predict, especially when they have the money, that at some point they will be let go.
Well, I think the main challenge, and I think we are skirting the issue here, we gave the president the sole responsibility to be the chief executive of Kenya for the intervening period of 5 years. And therefore, he cannot shirk his responsibility of ensuring that there is discipline in his house. But the main challenge is that our society is still receptive of ill-gotten money. That's why you realize every charge, they are inviting people they know will bring more money. And therefore, they are no longer looking at what is the integrity. The other danger, which I'm telling you, Mike, and I'm telling my colleagues, is that we seem to say because Kirwa yesterday knocked a pedestrian, today he cannot say there is somebody who has knocked a cyclist. Because, yes, I may not be clean, But the fact that I'm not as clean as I ought to be does not mean that I'm blind to issues of corruption. In Uhuru's administration, unless the chief priest of corruption, because if it is NSSF, if it is this one, NHIF or KPC, it ends somewhere. And that is where we ought to ask ourselves, where does the money go? And we live in this country, unless we are pretending that all of a sudden we have just arrived on Monday and on Thursday we are here at KTF. Otherwise we know the chief priest of corruption.
And when we are talking about monies and where it is going, we also have the issue that is before Parliament in regards to some of the machines that were given to counties, which were supposed to cost 38 billion, but are now costing Kenyans 63 billion. Yet, we have not been told what's the difference. We have machines that are in certain counties that, one, cannot be operated because there is no electricity, and two, because they do not have operators. Joy Mdivo, does this speak to the kind of leadership we have where we are purchasing things? I mean, if I was to buy something for my own house, I would not buy something that is electric when I know there is no electricity in my house. I mean, that's just a misplacement of priorities. Are we under blind leadership of some sort?
There's a weakness that we have in Kenyan society, in leadership especially, where I don't think we have thought that goes into the process. So when the politicians are campaigning, they make certain promises and they say, you know what, this is something that we're going to do, we are going to deliver this when we're elected. But they ought to have think tanks and machinery behind them to find out how can we make these things possible. Now, unfortunately, in Kenya, we are bamboozled by Ramzatas, you know. We've been treated, forget even about what the government is doing with the big machinery. Think about people who have unveiled ambulances, they have unveiled bridges. You know, we just throw things together like a magpie. We collect all the shiny little things and we just sit there and we get very excited by these shiny little things we have. Now, when we came to getting this equipment, it was excellent because we want to get services directly to the people. But nobody thought about, for example, the gap about the operators. That goes back to our education system, to the training. What are we producing? We're talking about people having unemployment, but we have people who can be trained to operate this machinery. But are they getting the training that they need? So this entire thought process was not put together. And that's why you end up with something being a white elephant. Once you already signed the lease that we will take your machinery, whether we'll buy it or we'll lease it, but you've already signed the lease, the money starts rolling. And that's what we learned with Anglo leasing. It does not matter that it did not benefit us. It did not do what it was supposed to do. If you must service that debt, you must pay for it. And we've gotten to a place now, I'm seeing people being taken to China and being given courses to come back and become radiologists. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, but this thing has been sitting in the county. Now probably the warranties are running out. Probably the machinery, the technology is becoming obsolete.
Phased out.
And now we are stuck with these things, and there's no sadder place like when you go to Kenyatta, for example, and you see this huge machinery that now stopped working because the parts are no longer being made. Or the one guy who used to know how to service it retired. Kenya needs to, we need to think about things holistically, and not just, we made a promise, let's say we delivered.
I see in terms of
yeah. What on this country is going to deliver general level. So this must have been given to hospitals where there is. And once we level such, I mean, we peddle such a lies, then we are misusing the opportunity we are getting to discuss pertinent issues. Then number two, what we need also to understand, the county government and the national government are supposed to work in a partnership, not in competition. And we also need to understand why governors, once they have been given the machinery, why are they not employing the people to operate the machines? Because there was a problem. The problem is the governor was not given the money to buy the machine so that he can eat some. And then, because you gave him the machine, he wanted to take some money, then he says, okay, fine. throw it there, I will not use it. We need to understand and to look at where the problem is and not to go back and say the government puzzled or used or misused the money. Maybe there's somebody somewhere who is making this money to go to waste for a purpose or for a reason because they never gained. And we need to understand the problem where it is so that we address it. But the moment we put politics into it, the person who is going to suffer is the end user, who is the common mwananchi. If a machine was brought to Kitui, which is a level 4 hospital, or in Mwingi level 4 hospital, we have a governor who is in Kitui. They have been given money for health. What do they do with that? And I want to thank my governor, who has done so well. All the machines in Mwingi hospital are working. And she has made sure that she has hired officers to operate them. So if there's any machine which is not operating in Shelegani, then Honorable Kirwa needs to grab the collar of his governor and not to come to the president and say, the governor, you misused the money. So we are not getting the value for our money because we created monsters in our counties and we devolved some services with people who are not even aware of what to do with the services.
Back actually to the debate we had earlier on impunity, because then if that is the case, then we have governors who are literally killing their own constituents for the sake of the profit that they did not make out of the machines.
Well, I think Mheshimiwa Mutambo started very well that there was a mismatch or there was no communication between the central government and the devolved units. And I think that is where the truth ends. Because how do you procure all these machines without communication with the recipients of these machines so that they prepare the requisite human resource capacity for them to operate these machines? Number two, look at wastage in government. Remember the issue of Changuli that was running in the news last evening and this morning. It was only 14 million. Now it is 64 million.
Correct.
Now, what has happened? There is 50 million more that will eventually be paid to the parents or even to the people who will have, who will be heirs to the current parents. And yet, if the government had paid those children some time back,
it was 14.
It was only 14 million shillings. Now it is 64. What happens is that the government is inviting wastage, is inviting problems. Because today we are talking about domestic debt, we are talking about external debt, but there is another debt that we are not talking. Suppliers and contractors have not been paid, and it is going up. And the government in the next 7 years may not be able to operate unless there is a magic.
So is that down purely to competence? Do we have
it is not lack of competence, corruption, and a lack of effective leadership. Those two things. Corruption, if you fight corruption and there is effective leadership, you should have the capacity to talk to the governor. The governor also must have the humility to talk to the central government. And if there is communication, some of these things will be evened out. So, and the issue is, even the person who procured all these machines for all the counties must have also been looking for a big cut. So the governor may be corrupt on the other side, but even from central government, we cannot say they are blameless.
Okay. Joab Divo, we'll have your closing comments and possibly the way forward for Kenyans. In another 5 years, we're going to be electing leaders. But one of the things that concerns me is that we have a very high turnover of leaders. We fire them quite fast, but we seem to have the same problems coming in. So is this something that we are likely to solve with leadership, or do we just need to have a whole value system introduced to our system in a method that I don't know how, because it's not our schools, it's not our churches, we all have issues. If we look at churches, there are those who raise concerns. Why are you receiving money that you don't know where it's coming from? And this is meant to be like the moral gauge for the country.
I mean, I'm a church person, and every Sunday we receive money from people who we don't know where it came from. When you go to church and you give offering, does your pastor ask every congregant, where did you get your money from? So sometimes some of these things, I mean, if somebody has walked through the door, you're supposed to tell them, you're not fit for the kingdom, so get out of here. We're told, everybody come in. Anyway, but church is beside the point. That's what I'm talking about today.
Not here to preach.
But the question you've asked is very pertinent. And I think I've said it here before. Kenyans need to want more for themselves, because we are behaving like a person who's in an abusive relationship, and when you have a chance to leave and you form a new relationship, you still find somebody who still abuses you. We have to raise the standard. And how do you do this? Just common sense. Examine the lives of the people who are offering themselves for leadership. How do they treat their spouses? How do they treat their children? The people who work for them, what do they say about them? What type of person are they? How do they treat people in a restaurant? Are you rude to staff in a cafeteria? What are you doing at this table? Can't you clear it? That tells you the heart of the person who's in leadership. But the things that we have to look at also in terms of the law, we have been using the law as a shield rather than a sword when it comes to fighting corruption. People who are facing corruption are the first ones to run to the Constitutional Court to protect their own constitutional rights, that's what the law is there for. But what that does, what the law gives is one hand, it takes away in equal measure in the other hand. We have to come to a place where we have strong leadership in this matter. Where does it start and end? With leadership. I look at communities that, for example, what Magufuli is doing in Tanzania. Common sense approach. It's unpopular, it's unconstitutional, it's whatnot, but it instills the fear in public servants that, you know what, if I want to keep my job, I need to get right to this. But if you know you're just going to go to jail, after all, jail was made for men, not for monkeys. You just cool your heels there for 2 weeks, then you're out on bond, and then now you can drag it for 6 years, and then you're free. That sort of mentality is what is keeping us where we are. Kenyans need to
ascribe to the notion some have said that we need a benevolent dictator?
I don't think so, because benevolent dictators deliver on certain issues, but on human rights records, it becomes atrocious. And they start as benevolent dictators and then end up as despots, where now they're not going anywhere. Even when they've outlived their usefulness, they're already drunk with power. So it's not something that I would completely advocate, because we have seen places where, let's use an example, for example, like Mugabe. When he started in 1980, he was the hero of the nation. He had delivered the nation, and everybody was like, yeah. But by the time he was finishing, everybody was like, enough already.
Had enough.
So this benevolent dictatorship is a double-edged sword. But as Kenyans, who do we elect? When we elect people who, in real life, we know they are thieves, we know they are unfaithful, we know they are rude, they are rogues, they are hooligans, why do we get surprised when they get into office and they escalate it to a big level? As Kenyans, we need to want more for ourselves.
All right. Honorable Mtambo, your closing remarks.
I think for us to get out of all this problem is to re-audit our constitution, whether we like it or not. We are getting problems because of the constitution we have. We are throwing the back at the president to do all this, but we need to understand that the president's power are capped within the constitution. We are throwing, blame on the DPP. He has some limited laws to operate with. CG, Chief Justice, DCI, everyone. I think we took more out of the Constitution than what we bargained for. And what we are expecting people to do, it is not within their mandate. When we tell the president it is to fire somebody, it is for the first time I've seen a president revoking or firing somebody, and tomorrow that person goes to court and is taken back by the same court, by court. Yet the president has fired him yesterday. We have seen so many chairmen. Your term has extended, go home, they go to court, they get court orders, they come back. So like she's saying, the constitution we are having, all the laws, because she said law, we are using the laws as shield instead of sword, but we created both to work in addendum. And it's killing us. It's destroying this country. So there is a need to review the constitution. People think that when Mutambo talks about reviewing constitution, it's crazy. But I know if we will review this constitution, we will not be having the issue of the gender. We will come back. To review the constitution so that we
Some who might be skeptical of the two-thirds gender bill, for example, the constitution is there.
It can't. And that's what I'm telling you, we'll debate this. We have to bite them.
complementary in terms of synergies from different communities. Number two, let's go back to the foundation of our society, the children. Let's inculcate in the young Kenyans about the need for patriotism, national cohesion, and need for integrity. This is what Nyerere did, and that's why Tanzania is ahead of us in terms of national cohesion.
How do we do that? Because if you look at the younger generation right now, majority of them cannot even speak their own languages. But we still see, when we look at, for instance, our social media trends, we see even the young getting very tribal and very, so it's not something that we seem to be winning so far.
We're not winning because we are ignoring one thing called globalization. Globalization has a very strong impact on our society. Therefore, we must understand what globalization entails, and we guard ourselves from that by inculcating the values. That's what Nyerere did in school program, and he did it by also leadership by example. I remember in 1965, he had to talk to the bank manager to reschedule his loan because it was his mortgage for his own house, because he was paying school fees for his children. We want to hear that from our leaders. But if a leader today is elected tomorrow, is giving us 10 million in every other function, that tells you is not leading by example.
All right, Joy, Brenda, maybe I know we are done the closing comments, but your thoughts on how we instill this value. How do we get this value system? Because like I mentioned, when we look at our younger generation, we would have expected that by now, because there's not so much tribe, and culture, that we've grown up in a different kind of environment, you'd expect that that would be fading away. However, when you look at our trends, especially when it comes to political times, that seems to be ingrained very deeply, and still there is that tribal war.
And you pointed out that many of our young people these days don't have the cultural aspect, but their cultural identity is also something that they have, which is actually an oxymoron, because if I can't speak the language, I don't visit the village.
Right.
But on social media or in other spaces, I'm very much a member of the Luya community, then that tells you something. And Honorable Kiro has hit the nail on the head. We have allowed ethnicity to be the lowest common denominator when we are organizing politically. And so you start thinking us versus them. And when you do that, we have something like what they have in the States with racial relations, where it's just a matter of, I know where you come from, and immediately you must be a thief, you must be a glutton, you must be a... And those are that's the stigmatization that is making our society not able to move forward. But what it has done further to that, it has brought something into this society that was not there before. Hate. Before, when I was growing up, we had all these different tribes, but there was no hate among us. It was something that you knew, but it was not a big deal. So what, you're a Kalenjin, so what, you're a Kikuyu. It was no big deal. But now we have a situation where young people just know your tribe, and there's hate over. On my social media, the people have had to block because of that. Every time I come on TV and I go on social media, it's inboxes of hate mail. And I got to a place I wondered, you don't even know me. How can you have this much hatred towards me? That's something we have to deal with, because if we don't, we'll end up in a society where people now forget about patriotism and national cohesion, and it becomes about interests. But where we start, again, I agree, it's with the children. But there is something we need to do before we do the children, because my generation, we are not very good parents. We are the ones who are giving birth to this generation that insults people, because we ourselves, we studied a lot, but we did not learn how to be very good adults. We have to start strong parenting classes. We have to start now teaching us how to be good parents to our children, because I keep saying, my mother never let me get away with it. So why do I let my own children get away with it? I need to be taught how to be a better mother, like my mother was a good mother to me, so that I can produce hope for the next generation. There is a disconnect in the social fabric when it comes to parenting. And the lack of safety net from the rest of society is producing rogues and charlatans in the name of the next generation of adults who've not been parented. And they're going to start having children, and it will just only get worse.
All right. John Tambo, just very few minutes.
It will be very unfair for me to leave this podium without supporting my senior Kiro. He has said something which catched my attention. You know, the problem of Kenya is so peaceful until election comes. So peaceful. So that tells me the problem of which tribe you belong to is brought by the politicians.
Correct.
Not even the children. Because My children and my neighbors' children, they play out there, they come, there's a sleepover, you hear this is a Luo, this is a Mukamba, this is a Kalenjin. They have no issue. The issue comes the day of election. So what we need to audit most is what is this thing which is brought by the politicians, the hatred brought by politicians, that this tribe against that tribe against this. We need to pick where the problem is, and it is more about politicians, I being one of them. So that is where we need first. I will start there. I will not go to my child, because I know my child has got no problem, and I can tell you for free, sometimes I get chance to travel with Matatu. I see the driver is a Kisii, the conductor is a Kikuyu, and they are blending very well. Together. No problem.
Absolutely.
But the problem comes when you hear Baba say, let us go to Uhuru Park. Now the conductor will not come to do the work, because the driver will go to Uhuru Park and the Kikuyu will go to the other side.
I think we'll wind it up right there. Thank you very much, Honorable
So that
Joe
is what
Mtambo.
we needed to audit.
Thank you, Honorable Joe Mtambo, former Member of Parliament for Mwingi. We also have Honorable Kipruto Arap Kirwa, Deputy Party Leader for ANC. And last but not least, we have Joy Brenda Mdivo joining us this morning for State of the Nation. Thank you very much for watching. And well, it is now 19 minutes to 8. We're going to take a short break. But do stay with us. By the way, today being Thursday on Black and White, we're going to be talking a lot about the modern day parent. So that's a good place to end. And yeah, look forward to that. We're going to be looking at how we can address these issues that we have as a society. For now, we take a break.